Chicagoland nights where the ordinary meets the extraordinary. Dr. Daniel Midnight, a man who knew the city's pulse as well as his own heartbeat. The ER was his domain. Every beep of the monitor, every hurried footstep, every desperate gasp for air was a familiar rhythm in the symphony of urban chaos. He thrived in the eye of the storm, a beacon of calm amidst the turmoil. But tonight, the symphony was about to take a decidedly sinister turn. Tonight, the ordinary would collide with the unimaginable. A pale young man was rushed in, his breathing shallow, his pulse a frantic thrum against Dr. Midnight's fingertips. He was wheeled into Trauma 1, the fluorescent lights reflecting off his oddly luminous skin. The paramedics, their faces etched with confusion and fear, sputtered about an attack, about strange wounds that defied explanation. Wounds that made Dr. Midnight's pulse quicken with a mixture of adrenaline and unease.
"Let's get a crash cart in here, stat!"
He barked, his voice a calm command amidst the rising panic. This was no ordinary night, even for Chicago. Code Blue, Code Supernatural, a patient beyond explanation. The ER buzzed with frantic energy. Every attempt to stabilize the young man failed. His vitals were a maddening puzzle. Dr. Midnight felt a knot of frustration. As life drained from the young man's eyes, a whisper reached his ears.
"He's one of us, a fledgling, needs..."
The voice was weak, raspy, urgent. A woman with eyes as old as time emerged.
"He needs more than your modern medicine can offer, Doctor. He needs blood."
A stark and chilling truth. Dr. Daniel Midnight crossed the threshold into a world he never knew existed. Hildy and the hounds of history ancient grudges die hard. The woman, Hildy, was a study in contrasts. Ancient wisdom emanated from her, her eyes holding the weight of centuries, yet she moved with a grace that belied her age. She spoke of the young man as a fledgling, her words carefully chosen. But Dr. Midnight, his senses on high alert, noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, the almost imperceptible glint in her eyes when she mentioned the need for blood.
"Who are you?"
Dr. Midnight demanded, his voice a low growl. He had faced down his fair share of desperate people in his years at Chicago General, but this woman, she was different. She exuded an aura of power that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. But Hildy merely offered a cryptic smile.
A friend and perhaps in time an ally.
Her words did little to ease his apprehension, but before he could press her further, a commotion at the ER entrance drew their attention. The doors burst open, and a group of men, their faces contorted with a menacing hunger, stormed into the hospital. They moved with an animalistic grace, their eyes scanning the room, their nostrils flaring as if they could scent their prey. Tom Wolfe, the alpha among us. At the head of the pack stood a figure of imposing stature. Tom Wolfe, his name whispered in hushed tones in certain circles, was a creature of myth and legend. He was a werewolf, an alpha of his kind, and his eyes, burning with an icy fire, were fixed on Hildy. The air crackled with their animosity, a palpable tension that sent shivers down Dr. Midnight's spine.
"Hildy, you trespass on sacred ground."
His words were a challenge, a territorial claim that spoke volumes about the hidden world that had been revealed to Dr. Midnight. Hildy, however, stood her ground, her gaze unwavering.
"This fledgling is under my protection, Tom. Your kind has hunted enough tonight."
The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch, the air thick with the threat of violence. Midnight hour, moral crossroads, a doctor's oath, a supernatural dilemma. As the confrontation escalated, Dr. Midnight found himself at a moral crossroads. His oath as a physician compelled him to protect life, to alleviate suffering. But how could he reconcile the tenets of modern medicine with the reality of the supernatural world that had been thrust upon him?
How could I possibly treat a patient who defied the very laws of nature I had dedicated my life to understanding?
The weight of this impossible situation pressed down on him, threatening to crush him under its enormity. The fledgling, caught in the crosshairs of this ancient feud, clung to life by a thread. His labored breaths were growing shallower, his skin becoming ashen and cold. Time was running out, and Dr. Midnight knew that he had to make a choice. He could stand by and watch as these supernatural forces waged war over the young man's life, or he could step into the fray, risking everything he held dear to uphold his oath.
My mind raced, weighing the risks against the potential rewards.
Yet, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, one thing remained clear. The fledgling's life hung in the balance, and Dr. Midnight was the only one who could tip the scales. The Hippocratic Oath meets the Fang and Fur navigating uncharted territory. With a deep breath, Dr. Midnight stepped forward, inserting himself between Hildy and Tom.
Enough! This is a hospital, a place of healing, not a battleground.
His words hung in the air, a testament to his courage and his desperation. He knew that he was treading on dangerous ground, but he refused to stand idly by while a patient's life hung in the balance. To his surprise, both Hildy and Tom turned to face him, their expressions unreadable.
He needs blood, Doctor. It is the only way.
And what do you propose, human? That you drain one of your own kind to sate our thirst?
Dr. Midnight, caught between these two opposing forces, felt a surge of fear, cold and sharp, course through him. He had to find a way to bridge the gap between their world and his, to find a solution that would satisfy both their needs and his oath. Blood Moon Rising, Chicagoland's hidden war. There might be another way, Dr. Midnight said slowly, choosing his words carefully. He knew that he was walking a tightrope. One wrong step could tip the balance of power and unleash a war that would consume them all. He had stumbled upon a hidden world, a world where ancient creatures walked among humans, their true natures masked by an elaborate charade. And he, a simple ER doctor, was now a pawn in their game.
Tell me, Doctor, what is this other way?
Dr. Midnight took a deep breath, gathering his courage.
I've read about rare blood types, blood that possesses unique properties. Perhaps with your help we can find a donor, a human donor with the necessary blood to help your fledgling.
Human blood is but a pale imitation of our own. It will not be enough.
But Hildy silenced him with a look, her gaze still fixed on Dr. Midnight.
And what makes you think that such a donor exists, Doctor?
I have to try. It's my sworn duty to protect life, all life, even if it means venturing into the unknown.
Alliances forged in the crucible of chaos. The ER had descended into a surreal tableau. Medical equipment sounds mixed with werewolf growls and vampire whispers. Dr. Midnight felt exhilaration mixed with terror, determined to uphold his oath in this new reality.
We need a solution. Fast. Lives depend on it.
This is about the balance of our worlds.
Hildy agreed to help. All right, I'll help, but this truce, it's on thin ice. The weight of two worlds, the human and the supernatural, pressed down on Dr. Midnight's shoulders. He felt like Atlas, tasked with holding up the sky, except in his case, the sky was a delicate web of secrets and lies, of ancient feuds and fragile alliances. The fate of the fledgling, a symbol of the uneasy coexistence between their worlds, rested solely on his shoulders. The pressure was immense, yet he refused to buckle under it.
I can't let them down. I have to find a way.
He worked tirelessly, driven by a combination of his oath and a newfound sense of purpose. The ER, his sanctuary, had become a battleground, and he, a reluctant warrior. He was no longer just a doctor, he was a mediator, a protector, a bridge between two worlds that were as different as night and day.
This is my fight now. I have to see it through.
He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but he couldn't turn back. City of Secrets. Whispers in the wind. As the night wore on, Dr. Midnight began to see Chicagoland with new eyes. The familiar streets and alleyways now seemed to whisper with hidden truths, the shadows themselves teeming with unseen presences. The city, once a symbol of human endeavor, now felt like a battleground for ancient forces.
This city, it's like I've never really seen it before.
He realized that the world he thought he knew, the world of logic and reason, was just a thin veneer. And he, Dr. Daniel Midnight, had been given a glimpse behind the curtain. The knowledge was both exhilarating and terrifying, a heavy burden to bear.
I've crossed a threshold. There's no going back now.
He was an explorer venturing into uncharted territory. End of shift, but not the end of the fight. As dawn approached, casting its pale light into the ER, Dr. Midnight stood at a crossroads. The fledgling, thanks to a combination of Dr. Midnight's medical ingenuity and Hildy's knowledge of ancient remedies, was stable, for now. But the truce was tenuous, the peace fragile. The war between the vampires and the werewolves, a war that had been waged for centuries, was far from over. And Dr. Midnight, once a man of science and reason, was now inextricably bound to this hidden world.
My life will never be the same, but I can't turn away from this now.
He knew that his life would never be the same, that he could never go back to the way things were. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back into him. And in that exchange, something fundamental had shifted within him. He was still Dr. Daniel Midnight, the ER doctor who swore an oath to protect life. But he was also something more, something else entirely.
The fight is far from over. I'm ready for whatever comes next.
His shift was over, but his true work had just begun.